Welcome, casemakers near and far. I'm Dr. Tiffany Manuel, and I'm the CEO and founder of The Case Made. One of the best things about the work that I do is that I get to travel the globe, and I get to hear amazing people who are doing the kind of things in their communities that are just so awesome. And when I hear great case making, there's only one thing that comes to mind: fierce. That's the energy of this series, and that's why I've invited you in. So come on in, take a listen. This is Fierce Case Making. Hello and welcome to this episode of Fierce Case Making. Listen, I am so excited. As usual, I'm so excited, but I got to tell you, I had a great conversation with Cyril Jefferson, who's one of the youngest mayors ever to be elected in North Carolina. One of the things I love about him is just his command of history. And as he talked about the work in High Point, North Carolina, he said, history provides context to help inform the future and propel us further, right, to do the work that we need to do. I love folks who have a grasp of history, but understand its relationship to its future. And lastly, I will say, listen, folks, if you don't know what a Grodega is, I didn't know what it was, but he explained it to me. If you don't know what a Grodega is, then you got to listen all the way to the end to make sure you get a chance to hear about the really innovative and thoughtful work the High Point, North Carolina has done around Grodega. So listen to the episode. Fantastic. Have at it. Great. Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Fierce Case Making. And I have the honor and distinction of being in a room with Cyril Jefferson, who is the mayor of High Point, North Carolina. And also, so I have this whole bio, but I love at the very top of his bio, I love this: husband, father, award-winning, social innovator, like all the most important stuff, right? Let's get to that stuff first. But just a whole range of, you just have such a range of experiences, Cyril, that I'm so glad that you're able to join us today and just to talk about all the work that you're doing to bring people forward, to think about the champions of all the amazing stuff that's happening in High Point, and just taking some time to inspire people all over the country, right, who were looking at this and saying, whoa, this is fantastic. So thank you for joining me today.
Well, Dr. T, same to you. Appreciate you, the work that you're doing, helping folks all over the country learn how to make the case for the impactful work that's being done. And it's no small thing. You and your team truly are a powerhouse, and we've enjoyed getting to know you all, being able to learn from you all, and be able to work with you all, quite frankly.
Well, thank you. I accept that honor on behalf of myself and of the whole Case Made team. So listen, I want to jump in right away. So I'm just telling folks kind of our connection as I talk to folks about this work, Fierce Case Making. The whole premise of this is that as I go around the country talking to folks and helping them think about how they make the case, that there are some places where I go where I have to stop and listen because somebody has said something and I'm like, wait. Like it's almost like the room stops spinning for a second and I have to zero in because somebody is saying something in a way that's like, oh, that's really good. Okay. Yeah. And that's a part of the reason why I invited you on to this episode, because that happened for me when we were, my team had come to High Point, North Carolina to assist in the program that we're doing, Equitable Development Data Insight training initiative that we're doing with UCal Berkeley and some of our colleagues there. But what impressed me and made me stop for a second was I was listening to you. You started off the first meeting that we had with a group of folks who were in the room, the Chamber of Commerce and lots of other folks locally. And you were just talking about the history of High Point, North Carolina, and then talking about the things about that history that really positions us potentially for success across the region. And at that time, you were a candidate, right, Cyril Jefferson, for mayor, but now you are mayor. So something about what you said not only resonated with me, but obviously resonated with voters. So congratulations on that, first of all.
Thank you.
But second of all, I want you to do a little bit of that here, talk a little bit about the history of High Point, North Carolina, and how that history kind of positions y'all for amazing success.
Dr. T, thank you. And, in terms of history, I remember in school, I changed my major a few times, just a little background when I was in undergrad. But for about a year and a half, I was a history major. And what I appreciated that my advisor, my professors would constantly teach is, Cyril, history provides context for why events happen. And if you can understand the context of history, then what it does is it paints a picture that can help inform you of your future. And at a young age, I don't think I had quite a grasp on that. And quite frankly, I didn't have an appreciation for what they were telling me at the time. But as I've come into public service and doing the work that we do now, you recognize just how important history is. And quite frankly, in understanding that history and how it propels you in the mission-driven work that's taking place. And so High Point is a city that, like many cities, has had a few iterations of itself. We're 165 years old, and we got our name as High Point because we were the highest point on the railroad. And the map actually behind me shows you High Point over 100 some years ago. And we were the highest point on the railroad between the western part of the state and the eastern part of the state. And for that reason, you know, the Carolinas, and what we did was we produced so much wood, which meant that we could make furniture throughout the Carolinas. Well, High Point, because it was that highest point on the railroad, they literally would meet each other right at the high point of the railroad to sell furniture. And that's where we get the sort of name of being the furniture capital of the world. And at one point, Doc, the majority of the furniture that was sold and used throughout the entire country, the majority of it was made within a 100-mile radius of this city. And so just understanding that history and a little bit of it has been really important. In fact, the furniture market is taking place right now here in High Point. We've got about 80,000 people outside my window in downtown High Point, where they are going from showroom to showroom. They're making deals. They are designers. They're big box retailers. Walmart's here. Costco's here. Target's here. Everyone you can think of who's selling furniture in their stores, they're here to buy it from the makers and producers and designers of it. So that's a little bit about the history, but obviously for the sake of the project that we're involved in, there's much more history that we could delve into.
Yeah, and I love that. And I love what you said about, you know, High Point has had several iterations of itself, right? I love that because it means that the history that we have to, you know, in the past or the way we see ourselves today can be refitted and reformatted to face a future that, you know, that we want to move towards, right? So that always thinking about what that future looks like, that's an important part of sort of case making. But I wonder if you can describe that. If somebody's thinking about High Point, what it is today and what it wants to be, how would you articulate that? How would you speak to that energy right now in High Point?
You know, the energy in High Point is us having this ability, quite frankly, to reimagine who we are. I grew up in this city. I graduated from my alma mater. That's not far from here. My wife graduated from there as well. And quite frankly, what we heard as young folks is people would say, I can't wait to graduate and get out of High Point. People just wanted to leave. And quite frankly, from communities of color, we heard that much more because people felt that High Point did not present opportunities for people of color. And certainly the work that we've done these past several years has begun to shift the narrative. We've begun to really think about how High Point becomes the very best version of itself as a community at large. The entire city becomes better when we find ways to create those opportunities for every community that's within this city. When we choose to uplift diversity, equity, and inclusion, that's not just some altruistic call. There's a real business case to be made. You all have been teaching us that, right? And we're making the case that the stronger economy is a resilient economy. But you can't have a resilient economy without a diversified economy. So the project that we've been doing with you all, we've been able to make that case to folks, to make it very, very clear. We're not just doing this because there's some folks who need help. That's certainly true. And we want to move the needle when it comes to quality of life. That's very true. But also, if you say you care about High Point's economy, then you got to care about the success of the businesses within High Point's economy. And if there is an entire subsect of businesses who are just not thriving because of historical implications, because of burdens and certain factors that have been in place for generations here in this city and throughout this state, we should do something about it. And quite frankly, the work that we've been doing, we've been able to build a choir of folks singing that song with us because they want to make the case too. They want to see High Point be its strongest self. They want to see High Point get to its highest point. And so we know that because we are the furniture capital of the world, that what we create here literally changes the world. But we want to see that in not just the commodity of home furnishings. We want to see that in our understanding of the people and the understanding of the programs and projects. Understand it in terms of the actual movement that's taking place, that here in High Point, the work that we do has a global effect. We've got to think about it in that big way.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's so interesting you say that. I didn't even think, when we were first planning to do, on our team was first planning to do our site visit, one of the things, I didn't even think about that as being like the furniture capital of the world. I was like, yeah, they make a lot of furniture. But it reminded me when I was younger, my aunt was looking to buy new furniture for her house, and she was planning about what she was going to buy. And her goal and aspiration was she wanted to come to High Point, North Carolina, because that's the best place in the world to buy furniture. And she wanted something fancy. And it was like, and at the time I remember being a young girl and I was thinking, well, you can go right down the street and get some furniture. But it was just the idea that that's the place where people go to, to buy their furniture, get their furniture. And so I didn't make the connection until I heard you talking about that, the history of that. And then you took us to the museum there that is specifically focused on, right, the history of the textiles and furniture making in High Point, North Carolina. So awesome. So I want to get to the question you raised earlier. So one of the things that is often challenging as cities are like yours are sort of remaking themselves, are reimagining who they want to be, not just in the past, but reimagining what they can be in the future. One of the things that is often challenging, right, is thinking about this very question you raised, which is the issue around equity. Who gets to be in that reimagined future? Who gets a leadership role in that reimagined future? Who gets to be the business owner, right? Who gets to be, the folks who are building developments, right? Who gets to be the folks who get to plan the space, right, in and out of the city? Who gets to be at the tables where major decisions are being made? And so, High Point is in one of those moments where, right, it's an inflection point, right? Lots of things are changing, happening. And so when you think about this issue, particularly of equity, of like who gets to be, and maybe some of the folks who didn't get a chance in the last iteration of itself to be part of the conversation, like how do we get them at the table so they can be? How do you think about that in terms of your work?
Yeah, and if you don't mind, Doc, I love to speak a little bit to that in the historical context, just a little bit. I think to understand where we are and what we're trying to address is to understand that High Point, having been the furniture capital of the world, was an absolute blessing. But what it also meant was that you had an entire community of folks who were offered a choice, much like the choice that my stepfather was offered. My stepfather is a furniture upholsterer, and him marrying my mother is what brought me to High Point, and my sister. And so, like many folks, furniture brought us here. But he, along with all of his siblings, were given a choice as young teenagers to say, you're living in abject poverty and you can go work in a factory. And if you come work in this factory, you'll be able to shit that you can eat, buy yourself some clothes, get medicine for your mother, so on and so forth. And for young people, that's an incredible choice to have to make, especially when they're telling you the only way you can have this job is if you show up Monday at 6 a.m. and we'll let you off at 3 p.m. And then you got to do it again Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. Keep in mind, these are young teenagers. They're supposed to be in school during those hours. And so they're faced with the choice of, do I go work and provide for my family, or do I go to school and try to get an education? And while certainly in the big picture, in the long term, graduating from high school and getting education has a lot of benefit. But the short term, when you're faced with food hardship and insecurity, you're dealing with chronic illness, you're dealing with housing instability, you're going to make a choice right now just to ensure you're okay, to ensure that the lights are on and that your bellies are not hungry. That's right. And so my stepfather, like many High Pointers, made the choice to go and work. But what that meant is that in the 1990s, when manufacturing, we saw it become outsourced as it went overseas, and we saw a lot of manufacturing leave the States. What that meant is a lot of jobs left the States. Right. And there were a lot of folks who had been in these blue-collar positions. They just weren't equipped to transition to another role. They didn't have the education to do that. And so I think to understand High Point is to know that in a census that was done in 1990, there was a corresponding report done to track education levels across the entire state of North Carolina. And our city was ranked the least educated city in the entire state. So if you're ranked the least educated city in the entire state and now manufacturing leaves, you probably have the lowest chance of being able to have your population make that transition to different jobs that require education. So then what that meant, because we had the lowest rates of education, jobs leave, now we have a case where right now today, we still have the poorest urban zip code in the entire state. We also are still ranked in the top 15 in terms of food hardship and insecurity for the entire country. That isn't just a state data point. That is for the entire country. High Point has been one of the hungriest cities. And when we first got the data back on it that made everyone wake up, it was about 10 years ago, we were the hungriest city in America. And so to understand the situation, poorest urban zip code, and one hungriest cities, that goes back to literally 30-some years ago when we were the least educated city, and then all the manufacturing jobs left. And so what you've got is a situation here. There's immense poverty, but to also talk about that, Doc, and forgive me because I know I'm going long here, but I mentioned High Point being the furniture capital of the world. But someone's got to make money off of being the furniture capital of the world. Right. And so High Point right now has the oldest Bentley dealership in the entire country. When they came from the UK over to the Americas, first two cities they went to were New York and High Point. They didn't just pick it because they were blind and trying to ping the tail on the donkey. They literally did their research, and High Point, in terms of wealth per capita, to this day is still in the top 5th percentile. Still in the top 5%. So you're talking about the 95th percentile. Sorry. So High Point wealth per capita is in the 95th percentile for the country. So you've got this Bentley dealership, 95th percentile for the entire country, and this furniture market that I just said is the largest economic event in the entire state of North Carolina. It has the same economic impact, Doc. I don't know if you're ready for this. Has the same economic impact as 4 Super Bowls. And that's every time we have it. So if we have furniture market in April and in October, it's like our city just brought the state of North Carolina 8 Super Bowls in terms of dollars spent in the state because of how many visitors come here and how long they're here just for this one event. And so High Point is not a poor city at all. High Point has a lot of money, but High Point also has a lot of people who are just in abject poverty. So it's a situation of have and have-nots and disparity. So work that we've been doing with you all, focus on equitable development, right, is to find a way to bridge that gap such that the life expectancy won't continue having the gap that it has right now between 27260 zip code and 27265. You have a 17-year gap there, which means that if you're born in 27260, you're likely to die 17 years younger than the person who was born in 27265 on the north side of our city. So
I love that. So again, y'all are visioning big. Y'all are saying, listen, we don't want to take that kind of wealth inequality, right? And all the other kinds of inequality, right? Disparities into our future. So what does it take for us right now? And I particularly appreciated that in the work that y'all are doing, y'all are bringing a real diverse group of folks forward. Like, the business community, the not-for-profit community, the political community, the economic community, saying, listen, folks, we don't want to take that kind of inequality into a future. So what does it take for us to plan for a better day? And I know it's not easy. I mean, that work, when you got those kind of historical disparities, the work doesn't, happen overnight. We're like, okay, like let's all, shake hands and be friends and pretend as if we don't have these kind of issues and walk forward into the future together. There's some real hardcore work by dedicated people like you who have to essentially make the case that a different future, right, where those disparities are not so great, is possible. So tell me how you make that case, right? You're talking to folks and they know all those statistics and the history of who we used to be, and you're trying to make the case to folks, listen, a different future is possible if we all sort of sit down and figure out what it looks like. How do you make that case?
Yeah. Well, I think we make the case using a lot of the tips and tools that your team has been teaching us, right? Yeah. I think we go to a lot of conversations doing our best to be armed with the amount of knowledge, so to speak, in terms of the data, but also just recognizing that there is a way to find common ground, quite frankly, I think, with anyone you talk to on this issue. It's rare you cut a person open and see what they really think. I don't think people don't want to see success. I don't think people don't want to see businesses do well. I don't think people don't want to see good quality of life for all residents. What we differ on oftentimes is how we get there. So where people might say, well, you're doing this program that's going to support small businesses. Isn't that just a handout, right? Or, man, my grandfather put himself up by the bootstraps, and that's why we have our business. Why can't you do the same, right? And so what we're learning how to do in these conversations is how to make that pivot. It's how to first establish a sort of empathy with them that says, I agree, and I understand where you're coming from. It's certainly frustrating to imagine that on one side you got someone working and someone not working. But I think what we agree with is that you've got people who want to put the work in. There are certain barriers and challenges today still, just based on the research and data, that are in the way. And we're not talking about just giving someone a handout. We're actually seeing an opportunity where people are willing to put the work in, so that way they can be contributors to what makes our city grow. And when we focus on what it is, which is our city growing, I think that right there, regardless of who you're talking about, if they care about this city, then they care about this city growing. Right. And that's what we make it about. We don't make it about this investment just for those businesses. We focus on the fact that the investment in those businesses is a means to an end that all of us identify with. And that end is a stronger, more healthy High Point.
That's right. That's right. Somebody I was talking to a little while ago said, we have to get into our heads the idea that, the economy doesn't make us. We make the economy. We as people in this community sort of make the opportunities to grow this region. And you can't do it, right, if half of the region or a good portion of the region doesn't have opportunities to grow, to thrive, to develop, you want, people to entrepreneurs to take chances, people to figure out to tinker around in their garages and figure out new businesses they might create, to take their kids to after school programs and get their kids, their imagination and innovation flourishing, because furniture may be the thing that put High Point on the map, but it may be something totally different that takes High Point to its next iteration as a city. And so being able to have people reimagine and get forward thinking of that, can really be tough.
Yeah.
Talk about the coalition of folks that y'all are bringing around to the equity work. I mean, what's interesting about you all is how you're bringing a really diverse group of folks. When we were there, we had a chance to visit a lot of the universities, some of the folks who run some of the local institutions, some of the local businesses, lots of the not-for-profit, the Chamber of Commerce. I mean, just a whole lot of folks who, in their corner, whatever that corner is of High Point, saw value in some version of what you were talking about in terms of this issue of the development and growth of the region and the equity that y'all need. Talk about what it's taking from you or for you to be able to bring those diverse, right, constituents to the table and kind of hold them together just enough, as you said, to find that kind of common ground, right?
Yeah. I think that common ground has been the conversation regarding revitalization here in High Point. Dr. T, probably, 7 or 8 years ago, this was before I ever became an elected official, there were community leaders who sat around the table, and what they'd known is for, a generation or two, High Point knew that we had to do something about the core of our city, because within the core of our city, we were seeing it basically be a ghost town anytime the furniture market wasn't here. And the dynamic of that is such that you've got these showrooms that are fantastic during market, but they're not occupied and not patronized the rest of the year because they're just not open the rest of the year. So what that means is a wide footprint of the core of our city really is dormant. And when it's dormant, you don't have demand for that foot traffic and people wanting to be there. It impacts the value of said properties, which impacts then the tax base of a city. And so you had folks years ago to say, you know what, doggone it, enough's enough. We got to do something. We got to do a big sort of catalyst project to bring us out of this sort of doldrum and feeling dormant. We got to recharge the core of our city. And that came with some investment to do a multi-purpose stadium, partnership with a master developer. The university got involved, and Dr. Cubane raising money to be able to make that happen. And that produced a park and a children's museum, and actually brought a baseball team to this multi-purpose stadium. And then before you knew it, the Condon family got involved with their foundation, and they created this entire campus to invest in small businesses and workforce and creativity. And on that campus, they've got restaurants, art galleries, and all that. Everything happening right at the core of our city, right in our downtown. And I think with that, what you saw was a cadre of leaders coming together to say, we believe we can grow this city, and we're going to do it by revitalizing and recharging the core. And so really, I think bringing community leaders together and bringing some of our partners and other stakeholders together for the sake of this project was because we never want to look at this as anything but a continuation of the efforts that have been started. What we said to folks is, everyone's invested in revitalization right now. We all want to see High Point grow and be strong. We want to see the core of it become a vibrant core again. We want to see it be in demand. We want to see foot traffic. Well, imagine Washington Street being a part of that. The same Washington Street that just 60 years ago, during segregation, was High Point's Black Wall Street. That if you walked on Washington Street 60 years ago, you'd hear laughter, you'd hear fun, you'd see money changing hands, you'd see people enjoying some food to eat, getting a haircut in the barbershop, visiting their doctor or their lawyer on that street. I mean, it was a very vibrant business district. And over the years, due to different reasons, it ended up not being as vibrant. But ultimately, when we talk about it coming back up to its vibrancy, when we talk about restoring that street's legacy, it is a part of a bigger picture that so many people throughout our community have invested into. So many people have already bought into. So we've made this effort a part of that one, so that way people can feel that kind of ownership to say, you know what, you're right. If we want to see the core of our city recharged, this is a part of it, and let's get behind it.
Mm-hmm. And I love the words that you're using. Like, that's the kind of aspirational language that we know that works to pull people forward. So you want to get people, you know, this to have an area that is revitalized, to be recharging, right? The energy. This used to be a vibrant area, and it can be again. What does the vibrancy of the core of High Point look like today? Like, you see, and I love the sort of visceral energy that you were, the words you were describing. You would hear people laughing, money's changing hands, right? Barbers are getting their, you know, are cutting hair, and kids are running around and laughing, and that's the thing. When people remember that, they're like, yeah, we can buy into that. And from our vantage, from a case making standpoint, you know, like, that's the energy, that's the, you know, that's the stuff that's yummy, the stuff that makes people want to lean into the conversation, even if, and we're going to get to this in a second, even if they don't want to lean into a conversation about quote unquote equity, right? Because I know you have folks, right, just like every city in America, folks who have politicized some of the terms around some of these issues, right? And so they don't want to lean into it because there's a little bit of a bias, or a kind of social construction of that as being negative. But when you talk in the terms that you were just talking in about the vibrancy and revitalizing, we all have stake in this, and we want to, you know, have a corridor that gives life, right, to the people who live here. That's a different, and like we can all lean into that. Like, come on, let's do it. What time is the meeting? What time do I have to be there for that? You know, right? Yeah. So talk a little bit about that, about what it looks like to sort of build energy and excitement, right, across these different folks, and get them excited about the stuff that, you know, y'all are able to do in the corridor, and what they will be able to do as more investment pours in and more people see the vision and they lean forward.
Yeah. You know, Doc, you just said, I think, the key word there, which is the vision. Mm-hmm. And you know, I'm a man of faith. And so for me, I think about Habakkuk 2, where it says to write the vision and make it plain, write upon the tables so that men may see it and run. And though the vision tarry, wait on it, for in due season, it will surely come. And I love that passage of scripture because what it just says in that first line, that says, if you write the vision and just make it plain, make it in a way that I think people can resonate with it. Put it out there that when people see it, it's not something hard to digest. It's something that's truly palpable, tangible, relatable, something that people feel they can aspire to, and that it truly is attainable. And that kind of plain vision, you put it there, you know, people will see it, and hopefully they'll run. Hopefully they'll catch on fire with desire to be a part of the coalition to move it forward. And that's been what we've been focused on, is believing in that high point where those who seek the opportunity find the fertile ground, that the seeds that planted, they'll rise up and they'll produce more fruit, and we'll benefit from that fruit for generations to come. And I think that is a message, again, just a very plain vision. It resonates with people, and I'm grateful. I'm I'm grateful that we get to see it and paint it in that vision and in that light.
I love that. And so one of the things that we've been working with you all on in a number of different ways is just thinking about data and how we use data. So much of the data that often we use to describe what's happening in our communities is negative. It's like this many folks are poor, and so the history you described that at the very top of it was kind of like setting the context. But we also know that if you put that data out there like that, right, just in hardcore like that it often depresses and demoralizes people. It's like, yeah, let me hear again why we're the poorest. Let me hear again, or we're the hungriest city in America. Like, let me hear that again, right? Because it's like conditioning. You're conditioning me to think in a way that, like, right, who I am, and sort of reading that onto me, right? But what we know about data is the ability to turn that around and be able to talk about the strengths of the community and to quantify whatever those strengths are, and to talk about the solution, use our data to talk about what happens when we address those issues, the benefit that happens to everybody, or use our data to specifically lift up very, solutions or systems. So when we use our data to like lift people up, it's like, wow, okay. Like that data points out, like, what if we were to solve for this and we were no longer, right, the folks who are the hungriest, but what if this community, right, which has agriculture all around it, around the outer belt, becomes the most lush and green, right, with opportunities to feed folks, right, some of the most healthiest food in the world, right, or whatever that is. Like, what would it look like to see ourselves differently, and how do we make that happen? So talk to me a little bit about the sort of journey of like thinking about what kind of data is like speaks to thinking about the vision, would speak to the vision, the positiveness of what can come out of the work that y'all are trying to do to get people excited about, yes, right, and leaning into their identity, right, as something like as problem solvers and heroes of the story.
Yeah, I appreciate that question, Dr. C, and I actually like to approach it from two ways, if that's okay.
Yeah.
I think one, I want to talk about how very recently the city, along with people throughout our community, went through this rebranding, and we created a new city logo and new taglines and all these things. But really what we were trying to capture was from our community is how do you see High Point when you envision this future? What is it that makes High Point unique, but also gives High Point that fighting chance to realize that future? What is our value proposition as a community? And people, contributed to surveys, focus groups, interviews, and just, they gave and divulged so much insight that went to the process. And that's where the new tagline sort of came about, which was, I call it a new tagline, but what it was a realization of a very age-old thing for us, which is that what we create High Point changes the world. And again, we've made products for years. We've shown those products here. People all over the world come here to come be inspired. You walk out on the street right now and someone here from Market and talk to one of these designers who lives in Paris or Milan or Dallas, Vegas, DC, New York, wherever you may be, and you ask them, why is it that you're here in High Point? And you ask them if you had to go to one show for furniture in a year, because you only got a budget to go to one, which one are you going to? Those people will tell you, regardless of where you're at and when you ask them and who's asked them, they're going to tell you, I'm going to the Market, which is at High Point, because no other place inspires me like High Point. No other place fills me and fuels me like High Point. High Point is where I go to get the latest trends. High Point is where I go to meet my fellow designers, fellow people within this industry who are the creatives, who are thinking about what's going to happen. I wouldn't dare not go to High Point because my business doesn't make it without High Point. So these are folks who all over the world see our city in that way. And there's a lot of people who live in this city who have felt that for generations. They felt that literally High Point is unique in that, no, we're not the biggest city, but this city of 120,000 has been a hotbed and has been a soil that's produced so much fruit that literally has an impact on a global scale. And that right there, that is a unique selling point. That is the value proposition. So if what we create here in High Point changes the world, then as you think about some of the challenges in front of us, the very good news is that we are right with the opportunities to be able to pull ourselves up out of this. We have the assets right now to be able to mobilize and transform, to be able to see this community continue to grow and continue to blossom. What we create changes the world. So that tells us we've got creative people all over the city. How do we tap into that? How do we lean into that? How do we leverage the creative genius that they have to be able to support them better? That's why we want to invest in entrepreneurship. That's why we want to invest in education. That's why we want to invest in quality of life. Because if you feel like this is fertile ground for you, we're not saying that we're going to be the ones to create that future. You are going to create that future. You here in High Park are going to create that future. Because if you come here, you can make it here. What we create will change the world. So that's the first thing in terms of that brand. The other piece, and this one doesn't wax as poetic, but it's a very tangible example which has to do with the food insecurity. So as a community, 10 years ago, they really mobilized around this problem. Like you said, they brought community stakeholders around the table. And they begin to think about, well, what are our advantages? What are our strengths? What are our assets that we can leverage to be able to be better at this? One of the things that I love was created was this Greater High Point Food Alliance that really became this sort of convening backbone entity for an entire food system, an entire ecosystem and network of people who are working together to address this problem. Everyone from food pantries to urban agriculturalists, and so many more entities got involved. And one of the big things we looked and saw is that, hey, we've got a number of lots of land that are sitting within the core of our city that are not being activated. And certainly, they have the potential to be developed, and we want those to be developed at some point all throughout the city. Right now, while they're sitting in the short term, they could be producing something. What if we took this stigma we had of being one of the hungriest cities in America and flipped it on its head? What if we become the urban agriculture capital of America? What if we literally see all these opportunities for land that are sitting around and be able to turn those into gardens? And we wouldn't do it as a government. What we do is, because the government owns a lot of those lands that are sit there that went into tax foreclosure, what if we basically gave those lands back to the people? What if we said, hey, we'll let you rent this space of land for $1, literally $1 for the whole entire year. And you get to cultivate and produce fruit and vegetables and flowers and whatever you want to. Not only did we do that, but we also created a farmer's market down at our library, literally built an entire infrastructure for it, that starting last Saturday, that farmer's market will run all the way through October of this year. And now you've got people who grow produce and grow things right here in the core of our city. They go down to the market to be able to sell it, and they make their living off of that. Now we're investing in entrepreneurship as well. And then they're able to hire people. So now it's workforce development because people are coming in, and now we're creating this very thriving, self-sustaining ecosystem of food production because we're saying to ourselves, we've got everything we need right here to be able to do this. We can grow the produce, and our people can be investing in doing it. And now what's become so cool, it's just the way we've really mobilized around that. There's been all types of offshoots of ideas as a result. We've got people now who there's a garden that grows hops that you can then go and make beer off of, that they then sell that to beer producers. And there's a whole business that was created off of that now. We took one of our old vehicles that we used at the library, we donated it to a local nonprofit called Growing High Point, and they've turned that into a Grodega. So Grodega is a play off the bodega, right? Like it is literally a mobile grocery store that goes around the city to everywhere where we've got a food desert. And at least once, if not twice a week in your neighborhood, there's going to be the Grodega, and you can buy healthy food, whatever you want, just like a grocery store, and it's right there on your block. You ain't even got to walk far, catch the bus, or none of that. And so it's been interesting to see the opportunities that come. Again, it's the creativity, what people will see in terms of innovation in the technology sector. As a social innovator, I love when I see that innovation in the impact sector. Right. And so being able to see people do that, it's just been so refreshing. And really assuring that we have the opportunities right in front of us to be able to grow from this and be able to move the needle.
I love that. And that just speaks so powerfully to, as we think about case making, that, having people see themselves in a successful sort of upward progression. So often, people don't see themselves as part of a bigger collective, And in case making, we have to sort of say, no, 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 no. It's not just about us as individuals. It's about the collective. And the way you're sort of playing that story out, like what it looks like when we start to tell that story, right, consistently. This is who we are. We've had success here. Like we had a challenge, we solved it, we grew. We have what did you call it? Bodega, Grodega? I love that. So we have we had a challenge and we came together and we solved that. Okay, so we have a bunch of additional or new challenges that we need to solve for, and we can do that. Let's take all the energy that it took to do that and move it into the next space, and where that may be education, and just have some success there and take all of that energy and move it to the next space. And I think what that does is help people to see themselves, right, as a part of an upward progression, as opposed to where some folks would have them see themselves as like, right, downtrodden. We're not doing great things. Great things doesn't happen to us. No, wonderful things are happening. And here's the upper progression of it. It may have started here, moved to there, moved to there. And that conversation, right, is super duper duper important. And that's what I see happening in High Point. So I am so excited about the work that y'all are doing. Absolutely. So excited to see what y'all going to do, not just in terms of your data and how you're using your data, but just in terms of the actual energy that you're creating about success and what that looks like in High Point.
Doc, I appreciate that. And you've been someone who's been a great collaborator and a great co-champion with us in terms of how we look at this, how we think about it, and how we continue the work. So that way we can continue building on the great successes we would have. So thank you so much.
I love it. I love it. So I'm gonna close us out just asking you one question. I always ask people about the justice journey that they're on. At the Case Made, we only work with folks who are like on a journey towards some kind of justice. Like they're working hard in their communities to figure out like how to make it better in some way, shape, or form. You've talked a lot about the justice journey that you were on, and how it started, how it's evolved. Say a little bit about what's next for you on the justice journey, and maybe not just for you, but even just for the city. When you think about the justice that you want to create or that you want to see, what's next on your journey? What are the big ticket items we should be looking forward to?
I'll be honest with you, and I'll keep it simple. We've got to move the needle when it comes to housing. You've got a real crisis, probably in a lot of places around this country, but especially here in the state of North Carolina, we saw one of our highest rates of population increase. North Carolina was third behind Texas and Florida in terms of population increase across the entire country. And so as more people move into the state, we just have to be prepared and have the inventory for that. And right now we don't. So there's high demand for our current housing inventory, but not as much supply. High demand, low supply means you're going to have scarcity, and that means prices start to go way up. And it's really hard to talk about quality of life and cost of living just purely for the sake of having a house, whether it's apartment or condo or whatever your living situation is. If the cost of it goes way up, it makes everything else harder to attain, like your medicine that you need, or trying to get quality education, or your transportation, whatever it is, it makes it that much harder. So if we can do something about that, Doc, I'll be honest, I'll feel really confident that this term truly moved the needle in terms of High Pointers, and that we were able to position ourselves in a better way.
Absolutely, absolutely. And housing, like anything else, you put the sort of principles of case making to work, and what it allows you to do is open up new champions for whatever it is that you're building. So if it was, Grodega, 5 years or 5 years ago, whenever it is, and then you're moving it on to housing to figure out how you expand the supply of affordable housing, or you are just creating more abundant housing options for folks across the region, right, to make sure that High Point gets a chance to continue to have a high quality of life and high quality of living, especially as you revitalize the core. Then your case making principles, right, put them into use, put them into practice, right? That's what I would say. Well, listen, Cyril, you are awesome, awesome, awesome. I'm so excited that you were able to join me today just for a little conversation. You are an inspiration, and I can tell you that all the folks who are watching right now see you as the fierce case maker that you are. I want to both applaud you and say, keep doing it. Keep bringing new champions to the work, right? Keep going out, talking aspirationally, being really future focused, getting people excited about the strengths and the solutions that you see across the region. So And we're going to make sure that we put on our website how people can reach you and all your connective LinkedIn, Twitter, all the other stuff that you might have, the socials where they might be able to connect to you as well. So thank you for that.
Dr. T, thank you so much.
Absolutely. So for those of you who are watching, I want to say, listen, folks, the principles of case making, they work if you work them. And so I'm so excited that you've been able to join us. Be inspired by the case maker that you see in front of you, Cyril Jefferson, doing a fantastic job. And I want to also say to you that when we lean into ourselves as fierce case makers, we get a chance to reimagine how justice wins. Keep doing it. Thanks so much. Bye-bye. Thanks so much for joining me today. You know, every new conversation we have with a fierce case maker gives me new energy for the road. And I hope that as you listen today, you felt the same way. You know, I believe in case makers everywhere. And if you don't quite see the fierce case maker in you just yet, hold on, just trust. Work those principles so that you can bring new champions to your justice journey. And if this information inspired you, then please be sure to like, share, and subscribe so that you can be one of the first folks who knows when a new episode is dropped. And until next time, stay fierce.